Hello and welcome to Talking Hoosier Baseball. We're recording this on Monday, March 6th, 2023. I am Carl James here, joined by Cassidy Palmer. We will have a brief visit from Chris, who will be delivering our red belts at some point in tonight's show that he pre-recorded. So the Hoosiers went 1-2 this past weekend at the Keith Le Clair Classic. Friday night at host East Carolina, the Hoosiers dropped that one by a score of 17-4. The Hoosiers came back in a comeback victory on Saturday, beating the Georgetown Hoyas 4-3. The Sunday matchup was against resurgent Long Beach State from the Big West. Hoosiers dropped that game by a score of 10-4. Long Beach State swept the weekend and took home the trophy for the Keith Le Clair Classic. They managed to they blew out Georgetown, and they just edged out East Carolina on Saturday. East Carolina, at least in one poll, was ranked number 9 in the country. East Carolina, obviously, a really, really strong program. And Long Beach made quite a statement there by by taking it to them in that Saturday game. I say take them to them. They barely beat that out. So two really, really good teams as far as competition. The part that's probably overall kind of head scratching for IU at this point is that IU scored 4 runs in each of those 3 games. So again, we're still not seeing the offensive output that we were expecting to see. But we'll kind of talk about the weekend, talk about the week ahead, which has already had a scheduling change, and we'll get into that a bit. But now I'll kind of pass it over to Cass. Cass, what's on your mind?
Well, one thing that I've been kind of looking at just quickly for the weekend, I'm not so focused on the midweeks yet, just the competition difference from midweeks to the weekends right now. And when you score 13 runs, your offense is looking pretty darn good. I mean, my scorecard is all yellow means productive, and it's a whole bunch of yellow from that Butler game. But looking at the weekend, I did some quick math, and we were sitting at right at 50% of offensive innings with one or fewer base runners, one or no base runners. And that's just something we didn't see as much last year. It didn't feel. It felt like we were pretty good at getting runners on, just not always consistently getting them around. And if we look at it, I mean, if you're only getting one runner on in half of your innings, those half of the innings are likely not going to have much of a score. I was doing a quick one, and I think there was only 1 run scored in those 50% of innings, because there was a Glasser solo shot with 2 outs. So we really need a few of those. They don't even have to quite be snowball innings, just getting something strung together. That can be walks with a sack bunt and then a single brings them home. Like, it doesn't have to be anything fancy or fireworks or anything like that. We just and overall not doing a horrible job at getting on base. On base is a little lower than I would like for the team, at about 366 for on base percentage. I'd like to see that a touch higher, but on the team scale, that's really not horrible. We're just not getting on in any kind of timely manner, not getting those timely hits that we're pretty used to. We are seeing some pretty hard hits. I remember there were at least a couple in my scorebook with little frowny faces, because, oh, the opponent made an amazing play, and that happens. It's baseball. I don't get upset at those. I get upset at the weak contact in hitters counts and with runners in scoring position. And it's like, those ground balls don't necessarily help all the time, especially with the way we seem to hit into double plays a little bit higher than average so far this season. So that was what stood out to me initially, just the number of quickie innings when we're batting, when IU is batting. There seem to be too many of those.
Yep.
So far.
Yep. And for me, I'm looking at it just feels like there's a lot less power
Yep.
than what we're used to. But I think a lot of that just comes from the particular bats that are really struggling are
Yeah.
the power bats.
Yeah.
And you definitely would have thought 11 games in, we'd be looking at more than 5 home runs on the year. And like you said, that's another thing. Is like if there's going to be a single hit that's going to score a run in an inning, it would have to be a solo home run, and that's not happening now. Compared to the week at Texas, we weren't dealing with death by ground balls this week, so
I was grateful for that.
Yeah, I think that the point is I see this week as a step forward. Obviously, Texas had even fewer runs scored.
Yeah.
Went from 8 runs scored at Texas to 12 runs scored here.
Yeah.
Of course, I was much happier with, the 13 runs scored in each of the 2 prior midweeks. But again, that's against midweek, the level of competition of pitching that, and things like we know these guys can hit poor pitching. They're able to hit guys. They're able to hit the starters when they're starting to run out of gas. I mean, East Carolina took Savage up to 111 pitches.
Yeah, that blew my mind.
Yeah, it's just to do that this
early,
practically in February is just
in a game where, like, going into the 6th inning, they were already up 5, 8, 10, 11 to 1 going into the 6th, and they kept him in.
Yeah.
I get that it's a round robin. They still have Long Beach State coming up, all that, but that still doesn't justify that to me. Not this early.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real tough because you got to have guys that can, hold.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was 11 to 1, so that means that's holding a 10-run lead.
Right.
Now we've been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hear you, East Carolina, but yeah, that's yeah.
And that was my issue with East Carolina. Like, by the time that they had scored all those runs, whatever, like, by the time that they were up that high, did I expect a massive offensive comeback? No. But seeing the number that we left on base against East Carolina, we had 2, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 left on base in a game. Like, yes, it was by the time we were getting to the end and the offense was really getting something going, we were down so much that it was almost moot. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit of progression there.
Yeah.
See, and it's not like these were all situations where a runner got on with 2 outs and got stranded. There was that in the 5th. You had Glasser with a 2-out double, Whalen walks, you've got 2 on, and then a strikeout to end it. Like, those happen, but like the 7th inning where Glasser was plunked, Whalen bunts him over, Jesse walks, and then 2 quick outs on 5 pitches. Like, I'd like to see a little bit more going on in those types of situations. More like the 8th, where we had an out, a single, a sacrifice. There was a pass ball in there too. A sacrifice, a double, and then a strikeout. We've gotten kind of used to, over the last few years, some really good 2-out offense. And it seems like we just haven't quite had that yet this year with 2 outs.
And part of it is it seems like each day there's a hot hitter.
Yes.
And honestly, that's not horribly helpful because that hitter is eight batters away from himself.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
They,
you had Philip doing all the hitting on Friday. You had was it Tyler Cerny was the
yep.
big bat on Saturday, and Peter Cerruto was the big bat on Sunday.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I like it better the other way when it's you rotate who the uh down bat is, who the slump bat is.
Yeah.
Different slump bat each day. Like, yeah, I'm good with that. But having just one hot hitter each game, like that doesn't help. And it's one thing if it's like, oh, this guy is super hot right now. Lots of extra base hits, but other people are hitting.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it seems to be a lot of one guy is really hot, and then no one else can hit that day.
Yep.
And I expect that'll straighten itself out. And particularly once we start getting a few more, I don't want to say less competitive games under our belts, but a few more tune-up games. Mm-hmm. A few more not going against an ECU Friday night guy. Yeah. Not going against Auburn and Texas and in those road environments. Like getting a few tune-ups under our belt, I think will help substantially.
Yeah. And a lot of hitting's about confidence. So
yeah.
It's just we know these guys can hit. We know these guys can hit against elite pitching. Yes. I'm not just talking good pitching, elite pitching.
Yes.
You know, top round draft picks. They can hit these guys.
Yes. Maybe they
just need to remember this.
Everyone needs to take after Hunter and pick one thing to change up and see if it works. Like the no more stash.
Yeah.
Because that has seemed to overall work for him pretty darn well.
All right. Well, the aspect of that though is that given how divided up it was from game to game, I have absolutely no idea who, and I haven't even listened to it, even though it's been recorded. I don't know who Chris picked for his hitting red belt, and honestly, I don't know who he quite picked for any of the red belts.
I was to say I wouldn't envy him this week.
Yes, because you know you had various various performances among pitchers, although probably I can guess who he did with pitchers. I'm not going to say it, but I can guess. And defensively, 8 errors on the weekend. I really don't envy him on that one.
Yeah, that was the one that I'm like, and that was the other thing that did stand out to me. Like I expected that first game at Auburn, first game on dirt, you can't simulate that one well. And so I expected some sluggish defense, some weird hops, some things like that. But I was not looking for that many errors in one weekend this weekend.
And again, we're dealing with this for the most part, this is a known element. And it wasn't like, oh, it was all the freshmen were booting things and stuff. No, this was the core team.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't massively bother me because I know it's not a core problem. It's a bad weekend and and maybe a lack of focus, whatever it is. Yeah. I think it's fixable.
Right. I would agree. I'm getting tired of the other teams being able to bunt for hits so well, because we've seen that quite a bit where they're not even like, it's not even really a sack bunt situation and they're laying down bunts for a hit and succeeding far too frequently. And I don't know if it's just luck of the draw. We've come across some really good bunters. I remember particularly on IU's end, Matt Gorski, particularly his freshman year, was phenomenal at laying down the bunt single. And sometimes you come across those guys.
Yep.
But
we had one that was played well. I remember. I just don't remember who it was.
Yes, I remember.
Who was the pitcher on that one? Was that Seti? Might have been Seti.
It might have been.
I think it was Seti. I think it was a play Seti made on Sunday. But
Yeah,
But
he had two consecutive bunts go his way
okay.
in the second.
Uh, so I mean, there's that. There's also just that you have to though overall be pleased with the catcher play. The
Yes.
catcher play has
Yes.
been a big improvement
Yep.
defensively.
Yep.
And I'd say both, and I'm talking about both
Both.
catchers,
Yes.
both
Who
just
have seen meaningful innings.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have no complaints about Langerman,
Well,
but
yeah, I haven't seen him.
he
Yeah, I haven't
hasn't,
seen him enough.
yeah, he hasn't been in there much.
But I mean, just watching Matthew Ellis catch
Hmm.
is a completely different thing than it was last year.
His
Uh,
framing has improved
yes.
so much.
But he's also getting, I mean, he's also, his arms working, he's throwing,
Yep.
he's getting it down. The pitchers and catchers together are doing a fabulous job holding runners.
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
not, again, and we heard that from, from some of the announcers and stuff, that it's just, they're gonna do it. They're
Yeah.
really paying attention to the run game, which was a huge issue from last year, because it was like,
Yeah.
oh, walk. Well, that's a walk is like a double
Yeah.
because you get a
Yeah.
walk and immediately he's gonna, one way or another, whether it's a wild pitch or a or just a stolen base, that runner always seemed to get into scoring position
Yes.
and was always creating problems. So it's so good to where that that automatic isn't, that's not like an automatic, runner in
Yeah.
scoring position just getting a guy
Yeah.
to first now is huge.
Well, it seems like based on the weekend, I didn't remember um, as many stolen base attempts on the weekend compared to at Texas. Seems that word might have gotten out a little bit. It's like, yeah, you might want to think twice about running on these guys.
I thought
But
Texas would have figured it out in the middle of that game, but
I would have thought, but you never know. But and to be fair, that's another thing that I hadn't that struck me at the time, but I didn't think about until just now. The sheer number of, I'm not going to count them as necessarily pickoff throws, but just throwing back to first.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 between two batters at one point.
Yep.
Another 3, 4, 5, 6, another 7 in one inning. I remember Texas fans really not liking that. So it seems there has been a bit of a bigger emphasis on
Yeah.
keeping the runners where they are.
And take advantage of it now while it's still legal. So
Yeah. Yeah.
because it might not be at some point.
Yeah.
But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this on over to Chris, who's going to divvy up this past weekend's red belts.
All right, so we got week 3 of the red belts. Okay, got the Dickerson Award to hand out, we got the Donato Award to hand out, and the Tony Butler. First off, we're going to go offensive. Now, Tyler Sterney had 3 hits and scored 2 runs and started the game-winning rally against Georgetown, but that wasn't good enough. Because this week, for the offensive red belt, I'm going with Philip Glasser. Okay, he got on base 9 times. 9 times over the weekend. 3 RBIs, 2 doubles, a home run, and he had the game-winning RBI in the inning against Georgetown to push us past, I believe it was the 7th, and that was the one win of the weekend. So Philip Glasser's getting it. You get on base 9 times. You have a 4-for-4 night on Friday. I know that game got a little out of hand, but Glasser was hot to start that game. It didn't matter. Defensively, there really wasn't a standout play or moment. But one play that did stand out a little bit, I know it was 9-1 at the time, was Brock Tibbetts. Making that play to his right, to snag that ball, and let it not go through the infield, right? Again, the score was what it was at the time. But really, it's another opportunity to talk about Brock Tibbetts' defense, right? He started every game. He's only made 1 error. And Brock, this isn't his natural position, right? Well, we didn't even know he would play first base when he got to Bloomington. He was a catcher. So Brock's really been solid there. You don't hear his name too much because he's not making mistakes, right? His footwork's good. He's solid. He knows what to do with the ball. I looked it up. He has like 7 assists too, which means he's making the throws he needs to make also. So Brock Tibbetts gets our Tony Butler award for the week. And when it came to pitching, there was a few choices. But I got to tell you, I know Yoho came in, got his first career win, which is special. But Ryan Kraft, with those 2 innings to finish out that game on Saturday, right? He threw 27 pitches, 3 strikeouts, and then he's got the guy on second base with only 1 out in the 9th inning. And what does he do? Strikeout. And the Hoosiers win the ball game. So I know the first and the third game didn't go our way, but Kraft made sure the second one did. And to blow that game late would have definitely put a different look on this weekend. So we have the come from behind victory on Saturday. And our, red belts come out to be Phil Glasser for offensive, Brock Tibbetts for defensive, and Ryan Kraft for the pitching award for the week.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Completely surprised me. Okay, actually, I still don't actually know, but which I think is even funnier. So
Yes.
I will watch it when I edit this. So we'll see, have my mental notes and see if I at all agreed or disagreed with what Mr. Feeney had to say in this.
Yes.
All right. So I guess next topic is pitching on the weekend. I know, and I can definitely tell because I somehow torture myself by in my tweet deck having a specific column that has all the replies to @Indiana base.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a really bad idea, especially Friday night. You lose by a score of 17-4, and
really, you give up 17 runs. Period.
Yeah, you give up 17 runs, and the questions start coming out. Of course, even worse than the fact that I saw it was that I actually started engaging in it. Now, I'm all with Chris, which is obviously we are so glad that you care. We really are. That is a big deal. We're glad that you care. It's just I do have a little bit of concern when, if you're going to chime in, that's great, but at least have a little bit of context before you do.
Yeah.
Understanding what's happened. And the point I made was, hey, we've been perfectly critical of the pitching. You go back to these shows a year ago. We were not pleasant about the constant issues. That's not what we're seeing. First of all, the other part of the context is look at college baseball. Mm-hmm. You are seeing teams, top 25 teams, give up double-digit runs in games.
Yes.
It's happening to everybody.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it happened to IU twice this past weekend, but that was the first time. And honestly, I think these were the 2 best offensive teams IU's faced yet.
Yeah.
Texas is a great pitching team.
Yeah.
They're not swinging it well.
No.
Auburn's probably pitching it better than expected, and they're really not swinging it well. So this was really the first real honest to goodness test of high caliber offenses. Yeah. Where they, where you've got good bats 1 through 9, and there was a little bit more struggle there. And if you look at the way the pitchers are being deployed, this is still very much in the, hey, we're trying to figure out, who's who and who is capable of stepping up in certain situations.
Yep.
And then also you throw in the errors.
And those never help.
Yeah. When you're playing good offenses like this, giving away outs is just... It is just horrible, and you just don't have, you don't have everybody stretched out. You really only have one guy who's really stretched out to getting true starter innings. Okay, 2. I'd say Seiler is as well, but Senard has been doing it on a regular basis. He's been putting in the 5-6 innings on a regular basis. So you can definitely say that he's at that point.
Yeah.
But
And
but some of the things is with the number of guys they've been trying to try out, the midweeks have been, at most someone's pitched like 1.2 innings. And part of the problem, I think, with all that is that you haven't been able to figure out who is able to go multiple innings and be successful.
right. Who do you trust to throw? I mean, I think at this point, out of the pen, Kraft is one that we trust for multiple innings at a time. Definitely. There are a few others that situationally can probably do multi-innings without too much stress, but one of the other things, looking at these from a pitching perspective, so not counting the errors, because those are free passes as well, but just looking on the pitching side, outside of these couple, because we had mentioned, I think last week, about how we hadn't really seen too much of that kind of snowball effect inning, and we saw it. I'd argue we saw it anywhere 2 to 4, depending on what you want to count as a snowball. The 2 5-run ECU innings, definitely. I would count that 3rd inning against Long Beach State as a snowball. That one was at least somewhat error induced, but outside of that, there were very few innings with multiple pitcher related free passes.
Yeah.
Because in this case, as long as they can keep it like that, 1 2-out walk does not kill you. It doesn't help from a pitch count perspective, anything like that, but 1 2-out walk is not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
We were seeing those free passes stacking last season, just constantly. So even that is a huge improvement from last year already.
Yeah, and against poor hitting teams.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. Yes, East Carolina hit the ball a ton.
They did.
They got 16 hits on the day.
Yes.
But the point is, our pitchers, put the ball in the zone and force them to do something.
Yeah.
Which is different than, like, you talk about, the blowout, the shoot 'em out race with Purdue last year, where you're doing that to Purdue, and it's like you're just walking, hit by batter, walk. You can't throw the ball in the zone, and you're just giving them all these free runners, and then it only takes 1 hit then to score all those, and that's at the very least they were forcing the other team to put the bat to the ball.
Yes.
Now, do we want to see that improve? Absolutely. But part of that is determining, step 1 is to get the ball in the zone. And this team has made a huge progression. We've talked about holding runners. They're not giving up free bases. They're not giving up free advancement of bases.
Yep.
So that is a good, solid foundation.
Yep.
And a lot of this has been by obviously getting transfers from either the other divisions or from mid-majors. Guys who have, who can throw strikes, who can not let things get out of hand, and for the most part, like you said, they've done that. Yeah. But at the same time, they're gonna give up runs.
Yeah,
it was expected.
Yeah.
Part of this pitching staff was built along the idea that this offense would be producing 7 runs of offense every game.
Right.
Which we're hoping they're going to get there, and I feel they're going to get there.
Yes. Well, if you had told me that against an offensive team like East Carolina, that the pitching staff only walked 6 total batters, that wouldn't have upset me. Maybe unless they were all in 1 inning.
Yeah.
That might not be great, but and even a lot of the occasional walks or HBPs that we're seeing are being erased by the fielding, whether that's catchers throwing them out, picking them off, the occasional double play. We haven't turned too many of those, or fielder's choice, taking out the lead runner. Like last year, it was very much the free passes were killing us.
Yep. This
year, it's a lot better about getting it into the zone, and it's felt a little bit like
Whereas IU's hitting a lot of atom balls all over the field, a lot of atom balls, some quite often hard atom balls. The opponents are just finding those gaps. And that seems to be kind of the biggest difference right now from a runs perspective, a wins
Yeah.
perspective. The finding those just hitting them slightly away from the fielders, and then the timeliness.
Yeah.
So that to me those are the two things that stand out, and those are two things that tends to be not uncommon for IU this early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Timeliness is not always the greatest on the offensive side, and it tends to be a whole lot of atom balls. So
I said,
if we're saying the same things a month from now, that might be something to reconsider.
Right. Well, and this said, and for me, it's a matter of the fact that we are talking about different things than we were last week. Last week we were talking about, a lot of really weak contact. Texas, there was a lot of really weak contact.
Yeah.
All of that seems to be improving. So things seem to be making the right impression, and now it's kind of going forward. And going forward, I guess we'll talk about there has been a change in the schedule for the week. So we still have midweek game at 4 p.m. Wednesday against Purdue Fort Wayne at the BART. I mean, the whole week is going to be at the BART.
Yes.
But now, instead of a double header on Saturday, the series with Bellarmine is going to start on Thursday, and that will be a 4 p.m. game at the BART. Friday will also be a 4 p.m. game at the BART. Saturday is now 2 p.m. and Sunday is 1 p.m. if I read that schedule correctly.
I believe so. And I would like to correct you. Said the whole week was at the BART. I'm going to point out that darn near the entire month will be at the BART
except for the one game in Lexington.
Yep, there's the one game in Lexington, and technically the first of the Penn State games is this month. So
yeah, it's just a whole lot of baseball being played at Bart Kaufman Field. So that I think is here's the time. But I like the idea of 5 straight games because it's pretty much going to put it's going to give an opportunity for all of these pitchers to have to pitch multiple innings.
Yes.
And get a better idea of really get some separation out of who can do what. And also, hey, these pitchers are going to be working without a net. It's going to be we've got 45 innings to cover.
Right.
So with 45 innings to cover
in 5 days.
Yeah, if you're a guy that we expect to pitch 4 or 5 innings, you're going to need to pitch 4 or 5 innings.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't afford to have an issue crop up and then have to start going to the bullpen right away. So yes, there are a lot of arms, but but now is an opportunity to, hey, let's get them in place and let's start doing some positive things.
Yeah. And to me, that's exciting because seeing the number of times I've been like, with a pitcher, like, oh, they were set, they were cruising, no problem. They did it on like 9 pitches and then they're done. And I know that's the game plan right now, but it's like, I'm so used to not necessarily ride him until his arm falls off. I don't want to do that necessarily, but if they're cruising and facing no opposition, I don't see a problem with keeping them in for a little while. So I'm glad to see some more extension of pitchers.
I mean, last Tuesday there would have been no problem with Ty Bothwell going full time through the order.
That was the first one that came to my mind.
He was just absolutely, exceptional.
Yeah.
He struggled with the zone on Friday when he came in relief. That game was already decided at that point. But we know who Ty Bothwell can be, and when Ty Bothwell is on, he may be the hardest guy to hit on this staff.
Yeah.
So that's someone I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he can do in a multi-inning outing this coming week.
Yeah.
No idea when exactly that's going to be.
But it's going to have to happen sometime.
Yeah. In a 5 games in 5 days, the brain trust is trying to figure out, exactly how that's going to be divided up. Although I can be reasonably certain we're not going to see 9 pitchers in on Wednesday,
Right.
as might have been possible if it wasn't stretched out like this. Although even then, I don't think you're going to see that when you're looking at 4 games on the weekend.
Well, in either way, it was going to be 5 games in 5 days.
Yeah.
Just 2 of them in one day.
Yeah, as opposed to being a bit more stretched out.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting because definitely the guys who throw Wednesday should be available depending how they do it. If you've got a guy who throws a couple innings Wednesday, probably available later in the weekend too.
Yeah.
So lots of moving parts for the staff to try to figure out.
And the other thing is we're obviously hoping that we're looking at the Hoosiers being ahead late for all of these games.
Yes.
At least the vast majority of them.
Yes.
Which also means, it will be really interesting to see how these power freshman arms are going to be used.
Yeah.
And will it be okay? Do we expect to see some of these guys make 3 one-inning appearances? They've hinted that that's where the plan is.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know, is the plan, this is what we're going to do now, or is this what we're going to do in April? I don't know how if are they ready to try this out against against a Purdue Fort Wayne and against a Bellarmine. Maybe.
I see these very much as development games. We might and I think of it the same way across all sports when you've got these kind of tune-up development style games. The final score to me is not the most indicative thing, as long as it's a win. But because you would think, oh, that's going to be a blowout game, or at least not close. But it does give you the opportunity to maybe put guys in different positions, put guys in mildly uncomfortable positions, like get them a little bit more. You've got a bit more flexibility to play with some of those things now versus when you're playing Auburn and Texas and East Carolina. And so to me, I'm not necessarily expecting blowouts or big wins on all of these. I am expecting the offense to largely do their thing. I'm expecting pitching and fielding to largely do their thing. But if runs are given up in the process of trying some things out, of experimenting, again, as long as it's a win, that's my big concern.
Yep. Well, Bellarmine is 5-6 as well on the season. They do have a game Tuesday against Northern Kentucky. They're coming off of another 4-game set. They got swept at Mercer in 4 games. Let's see, they scored 1-1. They did not score a lot Friday and Saturday. Scored 3 the second game on Saturday. They did manage to score 5 on Sunday, but they also gave up 15 runs in that game. So I imagine they're going to struggle with Northern Kentucky. I doubt they have much pitching left.
That's true. And
Northern Kentucky's taken a series from Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan, so they're not horrible. I'm not. They also Bellarmine also lost a series to Southern Indiana, who is in their first year of D1 play. Who Indiana will play. The Hoosiers will play them in a single midweek game. I think it's like in
later
May
in the season. Yeah. I remember it being pretty late. Indiana State, Ball State, Louisville, Cincy, Ball State. Yeah, May 9th.
And then Purdue Fort Wayne has managed to pull off a couple wins.
Ooh.
They beat Cornell in looks like a tournament game, and They took 1 out of 4 from Alabama State, but they got swept by Bethune-Cookman. They've been boat raced their last 2 games by Ball State, but we know Ball State is a really good team.
Yeah.
This is not obvious. This is probably the weak. If I had to guess right now, Purdue Fort Wayne is probably the weakest program on the schedule. They had a better season after they played IU last year. My hope is that program continues to be on the upswing. But they've got some tough ones. They have a pretty tough midweek slate. They play a lot of Big Ten teams. They play a lot of the better. There's a lot of good teams in the Midwest. So and they're playing a lot of them. Ball State. I think Toledo's going to have a good year. They've got a couple games with Dayton, and so.
And all of these are on Big Ten Plus, and I think Wednesday's game, but I know the weekend we will have Austin Render on the.
I think we're gonna have Austin for all of them.
I think so. I think so.
I think
there's no women's basketball game.
Yeah, Griffin announced that it was going to be Austin for the entire week.
And Austin had announced that he was the Bellarmine weekend. So
and I don't think Thursday should be a problem. In fact, he already tweeted out about that. So I think he would have mentioned if there was some issue he was going to have a conflict. So
I highly recommend mute the TV and turn on the IU broadcasting. Historically, and even this is significantly better with either Griffin or Austin. So
Yep. So okay, let me make sure I've hit all of my my points. So we've divvied up the red belts. Thank you, Chris. Talked about power, defense, pitching. I talked about freshman relievers. I had a note about starting pitching. Again, I think we just need to see more guys throw more innings. There just hasn't been enough to really get a good handle on what's really capable out there. So we've got the 5-game schedule. Maybe that'll help sort this out. It's great
when you've only got one guy who has enough innings to statistically count. That's pretty telling.
So again, it's one of those things, and the thing is, obviously there's risks with this. You don't be shocked if there's 1, maybe even 2 games get dropped in this process. I hope not, and you would think with the competition that wouldn't be a problem, but you got 17 pitchers that have seen action already. They're probably all going to have to be used, and it could cause that big inning. And if the bats are off that day, it's possible we could be looking at a loss or 2. I won't panic if that happens. I won't be happy if it happens, but I'm not going to panic if that's going to happen. I think anything worse than 3-2 would be bad.
Yes, would be decidedly bad.
Would be very, very bad. But I'll I'll take it if that's what it is. I mean, again, this is because of how new this pitching staff is. I just want to feel like this team is able to get right by the time we get to the Ohio State series, which is going to be tough right off the bat because Ohio State, they're making a splash already. So they had a really good weekend against some good competition. They've got some serious arms. So this is going to be a really challenging series when it comes, and obviously. We do not want Indiana to get off to the conference series start that they got last year and have to dig out of a massive hole. So
as exciting as it was at the end, I don't want that heart attack every time.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Any other topics you wanted to cover, Cass?
Nope. I think that's got me.
All right. Well, that will do it for this edition of Talking Hoosier Baseball. For Josh Bennett, Chris Feeney, Cassidy Palmer, I'm Carl James. And this week, for sure, we will see you at the BART.